thank you all very much for being here for Human Meets Machine, Equity, Bias, and Leadership in the Age of AI. This is our second webinar for 2025. And as I've been working with the panelists, it's the conversations that we had even in preparing, I think will be very, I'm hoping that those little parts and pieces come through today. And if I've done my job right, then they will. So with that, we will go on to just brief introductions for our panelists. I am Tracy McDonald. I'm the moderator. I'm the Director of Custom Training at the Learning and Development Initiative, which is a nice little collaboration between New Jersey Innovation Institute and New Jersey Institute of Technology. And I'll just have you all go in order of your gorgeous pictures here on the next slide. So Anisha.
Amazing. Hello, everyone. Anisha Parker here from IBM. And my role is a little bit of a mouthful, but essentially I help manage our market readiness approach for AI ethics and privacy at IBM. So I work very closely with our sales teams, our product teams, to make sure all things responsible AI that we've implemented internally makes it to our products and our services.
Excellent.
Great.
Farhana.
Hello, my name's Farhana Saya. I am a cross-cultural marketing consultant for CQ Fluency. I work with a wide array of clients as well as internal stakeholders at CQ to ensure we're really looking at everything through the cross-cultural lens. And so I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Dan?
I'm glad that I get to do my introduction because most people can't handle the last name. So my name is Dan Milzarski. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at CQ. CQ Fluency provides culturally relevant translations and solutions for healthcare clients. We're located in Hackensack, New Jersey. You can't see it. Trust me, the window's behind me. You can see Hackensack behind me, but I got this virtual background. So pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all. And Dan, yeah, I did that specifically so that I wouldn't end up butchering your last name, and you sounded great. So it saved me. Thank you. Okay, so let's just get right down to it. A year ago, and I remember this very vividly, AI was replacing humans. People were running around. It was Chicken Little. The sky is falling. I'm going to lose my job to a robot. A year later, what I am hearing more in conversation is that there is an AI human integration, right? So it's all about, so it's adoption and understanding how the tools work to be able to use them. However, we have to do that carefully, right? And appropriately, and be aware of what some of the risks could be. So let's talk about that a little bit. And Anisha, this is definitely your area of expertise. So go ahead and start. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the moment you described is scary for the workforce, right? You know, especially when Gen AI came into play, roles like writers, marketing professionals, a lot of the content-driven fields were really the main audience that was like, whoa, my job can be replaced by AI, Gen AI specifically. And I think what we've started to realize over time is that AI is not a human. I mean, it while it can enhance your day-to-day activities, it doesn't have the same insights that a human can bring because it doesn't have the context of, you know, historical context when it's related to, like, if marketing to a product that you're delivering. It's only going off of the data that you essentially input. So your data can only be, or your AI system can only be as smart as the humans that were training it. we're developing it. So I think we're finally at a phase where we have this concept of AI should augment human expertise versus replace. Now, that's not to say I do think there are some minor tasks that AI will completely kind of take over, and they're just simply repetitive tasks that humans have to do within a process. Okay, now you can focus that human knowledge, expertise into something that requires more thought-provoking expertise. So I don't want to say AI will not replace any type of human jobs. I do think it will, but it'll be the smaller tasks that human insight doesn't really have a great value add. And I think it's important for us to really have a process, or at least some type of criteria in place when you are evaluating, should I use AI to do this role, or should I use AI and a human to do this role? So investing in AI ethics is a slide that you have up. It was an IBV, so Institute for Business Value is one of the research parties that IBM has and partners with. And they did a survey with a bunch of leaders in business on how do you determine the ROI of AI ethics in governance? And this was the output of that study that was published in December of 2024, so fairly recent. And it goes back to all the things that I just mentioned, like what are the risks that could come if I solely relied on an AI system to complete a task, and I hadn't thought of what are the ethical concerns associated with that. Some of the benefits by just having that mindset could be economic impact. You're being compliant with regulation. You're avoiding fines because an AI system is making an improper decision and there was no human to validate it, right? There can be reputational impact. There are a lot of use cases where companies have tried to completely replace a task with AI systems, and they've made headlines, saying that, there was bias in the model, a lot of different concerns. So the reputation is an intangible benefit of ROI. And then capabilities. Once you have the mindset of evaluating risks, mitigating risks, you can put processes in place and even leverage AI in that process with a bunch of guardrails in place, of course, to speed up the adoption of AI within your company, thus providing opportunities for efficiency, productivity gains. There's a huge benefit just by focusing on it, perfecting what are the ethical concerns and the principles for your business domain, your company, your organization, and then streamlining that with technology down the road. That was a mouthful, but hopefully.
Yeah. No, that was great. And what I'm thinking is that, Farhana, as a marketing lead, right, the reputational risk, the words that we put out there, and then Dan, on your side, from a technical and technology and operational perspective, this is where, where do we start to mitigate these risks, right? Is it training? Is it awareness? Is it, how long does it take? And I don't even know if we can answer that question, to come back, right? If you can come back from a reputational risk, right? If you are just using a tool blindly and you're not going through the ethics and the governance of, let's make sure that this is what we want to use, how we want to be using it, and that what it's putting out is going through checks and balances. What do you both think?
Yeah, definitely Farhana can touch the rebounding from some kind of reputational issue that happens. I think from a technical standpoint, or even from a compliance standpoint, one of the ways that you try to rebound is by, if something happens, by addressing it and putting in some kind of governance body. I do believe that we're at this inflection point of using AI where it's essential for leaders and organizations to integrate AI risk management into the enterprise risk management strategies. It's not just something that should be kind of treated separately. It should be looked at holistically as part of your overall business strategies. You got to think about the direct impact of AI on your pricing, on the cost of goods sold, data security issues, regulatory compliance. As Nisha said, all of these things are a greater risk management program, and AI needs to fit into there. And I think we need to just be okay with balancing innovation with compliance, and that it's going to be a step slower at first, right? I think in working in technology, everyone thinks of the agile mindset as you just go, 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 go. Well, no, actually the benefit of agile is you're planned, you're structured, and that helps you go faster. So I think, the mindset of, I'm an entrepreneurial guy, right? Like, it's like, be first, not best, just get it out to the market. I think we need to slow that down a bit and say, hey, we could have these issues that impact us in the long term by trying to go too fast with this. And then just the last point to just kind of piggyback off of what we're saying is, yeah, some AI tasks are going to be eliminated. And think of like an executive assistant who is transcribing notes from a meeting. Now we've got AI note taking and transcription. I'll ask all of you is how many times were you in a meeting and you leave the meeting and there was no clear action items. You didn't know who was going to do what. And then a week later, you're like, oh, I didn't know I had to do that. Well, now the role of the executive assistant is to take this transcription and convert that into actionable items and staying on top of those items. And now agentic AI is going to even help with that as it improves. But you can see the evolution of these roles as AI aids in the process. And so I think the human in the loop concept, keeping humans involved in AI mitigates a lot of these risks as well. And if you do have a reputational risk, Farhana, how do you recover from it?
Well, similar to any crisis management situation, right? The first thing you want to do is you want to take the time to be transparent. Really explain what went wrong and how you're going to address it, because that's really going to be important for your stakeholders, is whether they're customers or your board or whomever, your employees and whatnot, your clients. So the idea is, let's be transparent. What happened? How do you take a step back and make sure that you're leveraging explainability tools, that you're creating these decision audits? What are the steps you're going to take moving forward to making sure that this doesn't happen? Are you continuously going to make sure that there is a recurring schedule of testing the tool in different languages and different settings and different cultures? That continuous monitoring is important, and creating a schedule for that is going to be key. There are bias testing tools out there. Were you using it? And if not, can you start making sure that that's also part of your periodic monitoring, right? So again, it's constant auditing of the data. The data is continuously coming in. You really need to make sure that you're being transparent. So from a marketing standpoint, it's letting all your stakeholders know what happened, taking the time to go back and audit. And I find that I'm auditing things all the time, whether it's just a project, let's say. It's actually one of the projects that I find really, really interesting is when we're doing brand name evaluations for our clients. And I'll, of course, work with humans for the most part on a project like that and check AI and compare the two. And we see the discrepancies, that where AI falls short of what our human linguists bring forward. And there's reasons why. There's certain things like AI isn't trained on vulgar terms as much. And sometimes if you were asking an AI tool for that, it's not going to give you as much information on it. Some AI tools, again, are very biased on the data that's coming in. So again, it's just juxtaposing it with that human element. And I always find it really interesting to compare the discrepancies side by side. And then of course, we then have to reconcile.
And that to me sounds like more or less any business process, right? Like even if you're doing finances or budgeting, a P&L, an email, an annual report, right? You are still like we as the humans in the loop, and we're going to get to that in like 2 or 3 more slides, because it is such an important thing. No matter what we do, we have to stay involved right? And I think that that's one of the big differences that's come out from a year ago to now is, okay, the panic is over, we're breathing a little bit easier, but we cannot just ignore it. And Anisha, I think that these guidelines, right, for AI ethics and governance, I mean, yeah, you can put out a marketing message, but there are some companies that never recover from reputational risk or financial risk, or, and you ask that question, who is watching the store, right? Isn't that your job? And people get like, it's hard to come back from that. So we'll go to our next slide, where here's the big question, right? AI equity or AI bias? And so in using the tools, right? So there's a couple of different things. One is in the world of using the tools, how do we spot biases, right? And I think that I feel like there's enough understanding now of how these tools came to be, the information that was fed. So it's, what is the source of the information? And then there's also adoption and implementation, right? So are there some industries that are adopting and implementing faster than others because they have that ability to do so? Are there certain types of information that demonstrate bias more than others? We've got two sides of the AI story here. So wherever we want to start, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I think we can start kind of about the spotting of the biases and going from there. And I think we have to separate that into two buckets of conversation, depending on whether you're a developer of AI tools and you're looking how to prevent bias from getting into your tools, and then the users. So you can kind of separate them into two buckets. But I think either way, the first thing to come to grips with is that biases exist in our world. So that's the first thing we need to understand is I told someone I was doing this panel, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be on with someone from IBM. And the response was, how did you meet him? And it was just a casual comment and general technology bias that you think, okay, someone at IBM, someone in technology must be a man. And so biases, whether they're people are aware of it or not, do exist. So we all need to just be clear that's the case. Now, if you're a developer of AI, as Farhana said, there are tools that can help you with this. In fact, IBM has one. They've got AI Fairness 360. Google has, I think it's the What If toolkit, and Microsoft has their own, it's Fairlean, right? So there's tools that you could be using as part of your processes to detect bias and eliminate bias from your data sets. And then also for data annotators, or the people that, companies that are annotating the data, which we all do it, by the way. If you ever get the, click on the stop signs, click on the crosswalks, and click on, the bicycles and stuff like that, we're all data annotators here. But for the data annotators, they are going to bring a set of biases to the annotating. So it's trying to detect even discrepancies in responses to the data annotation that's going into these models. As a user, the things you encourage is diverse testing, right? You want to try a variety of different AI platforms and see how they respond to the questions you're asking. And then also your questions need to be pointed to ask about different demographics and scenarios, right? And kind of challenge the AI with some of these things that exist and see how they respond to it. You can also just compare the AI against known standards, right? These things. If an answer just doesn't seem right to you, and because something else, like, don't blindly accept it. The other thing is, if AI platforms have feedback and reporting mechanisms, be part of that feedback loop. Let them know what you're finding so the data can improve. And I think number one, and Tracy, you're going to love this answer, and you kind of alluded to it before, is just it's training and awareness. I mean, it comes down to you educating yourself or your employees on the common types of biases in AI, data bias, algorithmic bias, the human bias, and so forth, and then understanding how you can work around these things. I do think at the end of the day is that knowledge and awareness piece is absolutely the most critical. You can't change behaviors unless someone acknowledges the fact that there is an issue to begin with.
Yeah, and one
I
thing
think algorithmic biases is my favorite new word ever. That was amazing. Sorry. Algorithmic biases. Sorry,
No.
that was great.
Yeah, so I think everything that Dan was saying was spot on, that you really just have to have a process in place, right? To evaluate the risks, because bias is inevitable. And a lot of the bias can really come from the data sources, the data. So ensuring that there's a process for data analysis, I think is critical, or at least the first step to mitigating any bias that could come from an AI solution or product. Because, if you're pulling all data from one source, of course your system is going to be biased. So you need to have some kind of data analysis tool that is determining, is the data represented fairly? And then another piece of that is kind of what Dan was saying, like the model evaluation in determining fairness metrics. What's the standard that either you or your organization has when it comes to being okay? Because there's always going to be bias, and all bias is not bad bias. Like you can go into a whole with a research executive, you can go through a whole analysis of like bias, like you said, algorithmic bias, intentional bias, unintentional bias. It's a whole analysis, but coming up with a criteria that determines, are we meeting this capability? Is it fair in this way? Are we transparent? Do we allow the users to check for bias and let them make the decision, providing that notice? So there are a lot of different ways, and by creating essentially a fairness check in almost like a checklist of what your company will be okay with essentially sharing that this is our fairness criteria, publicizing that, sharing it, providing notice is a good way to mitigate bias long term. And then also continuous feedback. Are you having some type of analysis ongoing every 90 days or putting some type of timeline against bias checks? Because we know that Gen AI learns over time as new data comes available. So new biases can be introduced essentially at any time. How regular are those bias checks? So I think that's an element that should be added into the mix as well.
I have a question. So how much of this can be monitored, evaluated, pre-checked, like pre-flight check, right? Like you're like on an airplane, by either changing your prompting or adjusting your prompting or putting the same prompt, right? And prompts can be many things, into different tools, right? So Copilot versus Gemini versus ChatGPT versus Claude, right? And is that one way for a user to be able to kind of do their like almost like a first level, like an entry level bias check? Does that make sense? Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And all these models, of course, they're trained on different data sets, and I think one of even the challenges of, you can ask the same model the same question multiple times and you might get different answers. I mean, that's one of the challenges of generative AI is that we've seen it too. It's like they call it almost like the water torturing, where you like keep asking and asking and asking generative AI the questions, and you see eventually they crack. I think that's a great first start, is to just try the different platforms and see if you're getting a level of consistency in their responses as well. That's a good indicator of, maybe this answer, the data, the variety of data is diverse enough for me to get a response that I can trust a little bit more. But again, don't trust implicitly, just trust a little bit more.
Right. And this leads us to the human in the loop concept. And I have to, for our audience, I have to credit Dan with this, because it was his term, and I love it, and I've been using it regularly since we had our early conversations. And I'll just drop a note too. So in the Q&A for our attendees, please feel free to, drop in any of your questions. These are super important topics, and we will have time to answer them. So speaking of the human in the loop, 2 weeks ago, we had a previous webinar about just the fact that, because every single human being is different, we are naturally diverse. We have diverse perspectives. We have diverse backgrounds. We have diverse histories. We have diverse cultures, languages, just our way of seeing in the world. And there's a multi-pronged question. Well, there are several questions here on this slide, but what I want to talk about is and ask you, so is there benefit to our own independent uniqueness in using AI-based tools, right? And what we then do with them, once we get the information back, right? Like you're putting a question or a situation or something into a tool. And what does that influence look like? And then we have talked a bit about the human in the loop, but there's, I heard an expression a couple weeks ago, it's the AI between my ears, right? So how do we remember to not forget to use our own AI between our ears?
Well, that's a great question. And I think what's really important is we take the time to think about the decisions that are being made for your AI tools, the decisions that are being made in your prompting. And, the more diverse perspectives that we're all essentially AI guinea pigs, if you will, right? We are feeding that information. We are continuously training AI simply by using the tool. However, if you go back, if you go back one slide prior, one of the things that's really important is to think about those examples where the decisions were key to some of these AI tools working or not working. So for instance, one of the classic examples that many people have heard of is, Amazon, right? They had this goal of speeding up recruitment. And of course, what did they do? They used, 10 years of past hiring data, leveraging that data to, filter out less qualified people and to highlight top candidates. And quite frankly, what it did is that it leveraged all the biases in hiring over those last 10 years to only really surface people who are similar to who they already have in their organization. And so if there weren't as many women hired as men that were hired. So if someone on their resume had something about a women's business organization, that wasn't giving them the extra points as, let's say, another organization that, let's say, a male would participate in. And so it's the little nuances that add up. And unfortunately, those candidates didn't even get an opportunity because they were not highlighted. And eventually, Amazon tried their best to fix the tool and eventually just scrapped it, right? Because it was how it was initially built. Those diverse perspectives would have helped in making sure that, hey, somebody should have essentially raised their hand and said, okay, from a decision-making standpoint, we really need to take a step back and think about, the approach. So I think those are important points to remember. And the same thing with some of these ethical issues with facial recognition technology. Facial recognition technologies had a hard time typically determining elderly faces, women, people with darker skin tones. And so the biases in facial recognition technology were based on, again, the information that was fed and the lack of diversity that was used to begin with. And so I want to just kind of give more concrete examples. And so those are just a few.
Yeah, and to echo what you were saying before, Tracy, I mean, diversity is a given, right? It's an inclusion that is the choice, right? Where, we can't deny that all of us have, different backgrounds, whether it's ethnic, gender, cultural, and how does that play into the success of the world is, improved problem solving, right? Like, I'm blessed to work with a team of, people from various different backgrounds that bring different things to the table, different perspectives. And I think we need to apply those same principles that we've been living by of trying to solve problems by getting different, ideas out there, and leverage that same methodology for when we're using AI. You're going to get broader applicability of how to use a tool or how to use a product based off of having diverse users of AI, better user experience, increased trust, right? If you're only saying that, like, I'm the one signing off on AI, I don't know where that level of trust is going to be unless you get this variety of people that are using the AI tool and inputting into it and giving their perspectives on it. And I think ultimately the goal is enhanced fairness. I know we're living in a time where, unfortunately, saying DEI is controversial, right? And I think we're losing the fact that sometimes putting a name to something can obscure the fact that we're trying to do something good, and that is enhancing fairness. And so when we're using AI tools, and you as a user should be cognizant of these biases and not try to take some of those biases and just put them out to the world to perpetuate and make things even more unfair for people that are challenged with, they're running behind some of the pack because they're already starting at a disadvantage in the starting line, right? We shouldn't push them back further by us using technology in a way that is just not good for society.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a slightly or an additional perspective to, like, the human in the loop. The example that Farhana gave of Amazon and facial recognition, so the hiring and the facial recognition, like, just to think if there was a human that was authorizing the final decision of those AI tools, right? The benefit that could bring. And it comes back to training and awareness, training and enablement as well. Like, it's not to say those can't be adequate uses of AI today. They absolutely could be, but with a human in the loop, a human that has been trained on what are the potential biases that could come from any hiring solution, proper documentation to say it made this decision because of XYZ, and you can easily point back to it. So I think putting a human in the loop invites opportunity for us to back up why our solution is fair, why the solution is okay for this particular use case. Because HR, for example, will always be a high risk use of AI. It's been claimed that in the EU AI Act, it's one of the higher risk items that will always be audited. And you need to ensure that you have proper mitigation techniques and that you're very transparent and explainable in how the technology is going to be used for hiring services. But it's not to say it won't be a function in which AI won't be used, because it will be. But having that human in the loop, having those bias checks in place, having the training for those employees who is going to be the ultimate decision maker from those HR AI tools is critical. So I think that's another element of why human in the loop is critical, especially in today's age, because we're going to use AI for a bunch of use cases. But if you have someone who's trained and they can ultimately review the output to say, let's trust this, let's take a step back and review all of our data and not go solely on the AI decision.
Do we think it's gotten better? So given the examples that Farhana was talking about, and I would say even just, funny stories that are out there on, if you pump some stuff into any sort of a Gen AI tool and then what comes back? I dumped my LinkedIn profile and apparently I'm an actress living in California. So, and that was like a couple of weeks ago. But so do we, which I'm definitely not. Do we think that there has been improvement over the years? Are we seeing changes just in the way people are using the tools based on some of those past mistakes? Do we see more adoption of AI policies and ethics and procedures? Are you all seeing that? What's the thoughts?
I think there's an emphasis on privacy. Like from a user perspective, I think they're more aware of not only can AI be incredibly helpful for my job, but let me think about, how are they actually getting this data? Are they taking my information? I think end users are starting to get more cognizant of what the risks are. And in turn, it's forcing the producers of these AI solutions to have a great response on, how it's not invading your privacy, or if it is, mitigate and determine, how can they be transparent or not collect certain information. So I think the end user is becoming more educated. And there are cases where, like, I think we'll get to like the digital native and the older perspective, but I think the fact that the everyday user is becoming more aware of the risks and then making the risk mitigation, the risk analysis, the risk assessment more critical for the corporations who are actually creating the AI systems and solutions.
Yeah, I think the technology is just getting better too, right? If you compare the different models over the years, the technology is just getting better. It's improved. The data sets, the way that they're training models are just becoming better. Like one of the uses of AI that helps me out, and it might be a shock to anyone from my team that's listening, but I help them use AI to help write the annual evaluations for my team. Like I plug in some things and I help like craft some of the responses based off of that. And it's remarkable that say if you don't specify a gender in the AI tool, it just says they instead of assuming a him or a her. Now, if you do say, if you start off with she or he, it will then help craft it according to the gender that you're putting in there. But that wasn't the case originally, right? It was making a lot more of these gender assumptions. And that's something that in the language industry that we see oftentimes, especially because there are different rules for genders in certain languages. And you start to see how those lines begin to cross. And even like thinking of AI using for translation and always translating, doctor in the masculine and nurse in the feminine. Well, those are gender biases that are, seeping into the data set. And I think the technology itself has gotten better. So you blend that in with, the people getting better. Definitely still need the policies and procedures in place and the guardrails to make sure that it exists on within your organization. I do think we're in a much better spot than we were a couple of years ago when generative AI punched us all in the face.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think your culture plays a huge role in adoption, right? So when you think about the different regions and different parts of the world, when you think of, for instance, Europe, there's a lot more emphasis on privacy. In the US, there's this sense of job security. And so you have sort of different cultures around the world. There are certain cultures that are ready to adopt and quick to do so. And then the concerns kind of vary around the world. And so depending on what the use case is, you'll see where there's some hesitancy and where there's some excitement behind jumping on board. And you also have to realize that English dominant cultures really benefited from, sort of that early AI innovations that then eventually, of course, needed to be available for other languages. But it's taking time. And again, you're going to see it manifest itself differently across different regions around the world and different cultures.
Right. And I guess that's to be expected, probably like most other things, right? In life and in the world. So speaking of diversity, one thing we haven't talked about is diversity of age, right? There are many workplaces where you've got young digital natives, right? What I'll call my own kids' ages, right? Like they've grown up a certain way, combined with people my age who remember when the internet first showed up and email first started, right? And so is there a difference? Does age, just a simple question, does age influence adoption of AI-based tools?
So I'll go back to a comment I was kind of saying earlier, where the younger generation is seen as like the digital native, and the older individuals are digital immigrants, you could say. But I think that it's because those who are being categorized in like the older individuals, digital immigrants, you can say they're not quick to realize the benefits of what the AI solution could bring to them. So I think it's an education opportunity, or it's a feature opportunity for industries. You know, what are the services that the older generation typically tend to use on day to day? You know, how can you leverage AI to make their days, their day to day, a more seamless experience? Because when you think about AI, the main benefits are they either save you time by doing a task quicker, or it generates insights that you wouldn't have naturally thought about. Everybody wants that, regardless of your age. So I think there's a kind of a gap between people knowing that up front, but then at the same time, you'll see some older generations that are really quick to leverage AI. And I think it's just because they realize the value generation much quicker. So I see it as more of an less of an age gap, but just an education gap, or an awareness gap of the benefits.
I mean, I do, again, without creating more biases in our world, I do tend to think that the younger generation does get AI much faster, much quicker. I mean, my 12-year-old daughter, she uses generative AI. I mean, you know, she's adapted well to this. I think that from a mindset perspective, the younger users want AI to do things for them. They just want to, you know, they look at something as, hey, this generated a great first draft for me. This is awesome. Whereas I think some more experienced professionals will look at it as, this doesn't live up to my standards, as opposed to looking at the advantages of a good first draft using AI. They're just, this isn't as good as me. Like, that's just a mind shift where I think the more experienced people actually could get the most benefit out of using AI, because they have all of that real world experience. They've got all of the skill sets and all of the things that got them to that point in their career. Now they can use AI as this new like super boost, like they give them an extra superpower down the home stretch of their career, possibly do more things, and you know, maybe spend a little less time at the office if they you know, realize like, hey, that I can use this now to simplify some of the things that I'm used to. You know, it's okay for it to be like not perfect, right? Don't expect perfection out of the AI tool. Use it the way that you would to say if you hired an intern and said, hey, I'm going to give you like 3 bullet points on this report that I need, generate a report for me. It's going to be a very similar. You're going to have to put work into it. You're going to have to, like, you know, craft it into your vision. The thing is with AI though, is I think the more you use it and the more prompting and the more experience you get with that, the better those first drafts get over time and the less rework you're going to have to do.
And naturally
Excellent.
say that culture plays a role again, right? It's age, but it's also culture, right? So, you know, as we tell our children here in the US, like the younger generation, Dan was mentioning his 12-year-old, well, my 11-year-old is super eager with AI as well. But the more we continue to almost not censor it, but you know, her Chromebooks at school, she can't log on to a lot of these AI platforms, just because for many reasons that I'm sure you can understand. So, you know, here the more we sort of try to not censor it, but block it, the more they're eager to learn about it. And so it becomes this cultural phenomenon of wanting more and wanting to be a part of it. You know, they're surrounded by social media, smartphones. This is what they grew up with. They don't know a life other than that. So again, that has become part of our culture. So something that's really important to continue to think about. You know, if you go to other regions of the world, you know, that's level of sort of, I hate to say the word censorship, because it's not quite censorship. It's just, you know, blocking it at this point in their age. But in other parts of the world, that's a little bit more acceptable, right? Whereas our kids are taught, like, we've got to figure out a way to circumvent this and immerse themselves in this digital age. It's right. Gonna be an interesting generation for sure, this Gen Alpha.
It's fascinating to watch. And I am so curious, in 5 years, when we look back, in 10 years, in a year, right? I've already seen differences in a year. We have a question from our panel, from our audience. How do you all envision regulations being applied to Gen AI creation and application?
I mean, we're already seeing a lot of that. Europe is leading the way with a lot of that stuff, and they kind of led the way with data protection, of course, with the EU Data Protection Act, which became GDPR and so forth. So they're kind of leading the way with that. In the States, it's going to be interesting because of the new administration and some of the technology influence that is being done on the administration, where I think that it's a more laissez-faire attitude at this point in time. It's a little bit more open-minded of trying to be first and best in the world in AI, and even some of the regulations around the shipment of microprocessing chips outside of the US, which has led to countries becoming very innovative. You think of DeepSeek as this kind of counter reaction to a regulation that was put forth against China. They come up with this model that is using less CPUs, and I do think we were on the path here in the United States for a while where it was going to be much like, an FDA regulated, you must stamp your AI usage by saying generated by AI. That was the path we were on. I think it's kind of, and Anisha, I don't know if you're seeing something else from your side. It's starting to, the pendulum's starting to swing the other way, where it's a more like do what you want attitude.
Yeah, but it's important to note. So the experience regulation that is out there is the EU AI Act, and the EU AI Act has extraterritorial risks. So that means if you're a global company, if you do any type of business in Europe, you still have to adhere to that. So I think we're going to see a lot of at least bigger scale companies start to put the governance practices in place and the AI baselines in place to adhere with the EU AI Act. And the AI Act takes a risk-based approach. So they deem uses as high risk, moderate risk, and prohibited risk. Uses that they absolutely would not support in the European Union. And that's been an approach that we have been taking internally at IBM ahead of regulation, just because it makes it easier for, a company to assess different uses, base it off of what the potential risks are, where it's going to be used, if there's potential for secondary use. And I think the EU AI Act has done a great job at that. And because of its extraterritorial reach, I think we're going to start to see a lot of big companies already take that approach, kind of regardless of what the US stance will be on regulation. But it's interesting to kind of see how we were on a path, very quickly shifted to, let's just be the top creators and competitors of AI. But most companies are global, and I think we're at a phase where companies also just want to do what's right because of those risks that we talked about, reputational risk, economic risk, all of that. So I think, I'm hoping it'll be a problem that kind of solves itself when it comes to protecting users absent of concrete regulation. So that's what I'm hoping. But the fact that we do have a framework that will still apply to a lot of US-based companies because they are global, I think will kind of set the standard and the baseline of how
we have a follow-up question to that question from our audience. Will there be informational blockage for information being sent to Europe if the content is not compliant with EU AI standards? That's
Yeah,
an
I
excellent question.
totally see that. I mean, you're seeing how EU has prohibited like usage of Facebook and messaging and things like that. Like, I mean, there's already a precedent that's already been set for that. So yeah, I do think that that's part of the future. And to kind of tie back into something you said earlier too, Tracy, was you also have to look at the industries involved here, right? And what industry you play in. Typically, if you're a highly regulated industry to begin with, like if you're in a pharmaceutical industry, there's going to be a higher level of risk mitigation and management in your organization anyway, that is inherently going to seep into any AI policies, regardless of whether you work in Europe or not. I think it's just a very risk averse industry will be more inclined to try to avoid these things anyway. But I do think that when you're talking about transfer of data, especially in Europe, if you want to work in businesses in Europe, you typically need to work within a European data center, and you got to be able to ensure that anyone who has access to the data has consent of where the data is being stored and so forth. And I think it's going to be the same thing with trying to push and pull information AI models to and from Europe. I think that's absolutely something that could happen.
Wow. All right. Well, we have 4 minutes left. So are there any, I don't see any new questions in the Q&A. Are there any final thoughts that each of you wants to share with the audience today?
I just got one. Just be kind to AI. Say please and thanks. I'm serious. If you're grown up, your parents told you to say please and thank you. Do the same thing with AI, because you never know if they're going to eventually turn into Terminators, and you want to be on their good side. So just always be respectful of the AI.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, AI, for all of that you've done. I'm add a little fun to the mix. I'm currently planning a wedding, and I use Gen AI model to help with all my communications to all my wedding guests. So I think that's a very practical use for communications. But I think it's important, or at least I try to share with my close family and friends. They know I work for IBM. They're like, oh, AI, it's going to take our jobs. And I'm like, it's really allowing you to get smarter. It's giving you access to more data that more quickly that you wouldn't have had access to. So kind of just changing the mindset of it can't replace me if I'm continuously getting smarter. It can't replace me if I can create new data points from the data I'm able to get from an AI solution. So shifting the mindset a little bit, I think could tremendously help.
Excellent.
For me, I say human in the loop is be the change you want to see in this world. When we're talking about, for instance, regulation, a lot of that's happening at the local level and bubbling up. So when you're looking at anything from hiring practices, lending practices, healthcare practices, a lot of that is happening at the grassroots level and bubbling up. It's at the state level before we start having more of that conversation at the federal level. And so human in the loop, be the change you want to see, continue to monitor this, be the, tech activist and making sure that this is going to be what we want it to be. That these machines don't become, one of these scary movies and aren't trained properly. It's all in our hands. It's up to us.
Very fair points. If I could add one thing, and a bunch of this coming from personal experience, take the time to learn how to use the tools. Because if we learn how to use them and then we can get used to it and then spot things and then see things, we can be aware of, or more readily aware of, either what those biases are, what the benefits are, what the capabilities are and what they are not, right? It's really understanding how to use it in the best way. Well, we are at time. I thank you all so very much for being here today. This was a phenomenal discussion. I loved the insights. I really appreciate you all taking the time and preparing and sharing your thoughts and making us aware of what we need to watch out for, and also to remember that human in the loop is key, right? We can never, ever, ever forget that. So thank you all, and have a phenomenal weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.